Hey everyone! If you enjoyed this video, the full version is available on Patreon. I'll be uploading all my content there going forward.
Chapter 1. The Great Pirate Era, 23 years in total. A full year has passed since the smoke of the Marineford War cleared. That world-shaking battle changed the landscape of this sea. The fall of the strongest man, Whitebeard, shattered the three-way balance that had been maintained for many years. The throne of the New World changed hands, the Marine headquarters relocated, and the 7 warlords of the sea underwent a major reshuffle. Everything is changing. In particular, Whitebeard's dying words, "The One Piece is real," poured boiling oil into this crazy era. Countless ambitious individuals set sail, hoping to gain a share of the spoils in this chaotic world. However, strangely enough, the sea did not descend into endless chaos as people had expected. On the contrary, it fell into an unsettling calm. It was the utterly oppressive silence before a storm. Blackbeard absorbed Whitebeard's former territory, frantically accumulating power, waiting for his chance to strike. The other 3 emperors sat high on the clouds, observing with indifference. The newly appointed Admiral Sakazuki promotes a ruthless and just policy, and his global conscription campaign is in full swing. His naval warships patrol the seas with an imposing presence. All parties are waiting. Waiting for an opportunity to break the deadlock. Waiting for a spark that can ignite the entire powder keg. The first half of the Grand Line, in the waters near the Sabayati archipelago. The sunlight was a bit dazzling, the sea shimmered, and occasionally a seagull would fly by, letting out a few clear cries. A strangely shaped 3-masted sailing ship was slowly drifting with the ocean current. The ship was an old, dark red color, its decks marked with the marks of time, its huge sails patched up, and it flew a somber skull flag. By any measure, this looks like an antique that should be lying in a museum, or a piece of junk just salvaged from an underwater shipwreck graveyard. Strangely, on the deck of this ship, which reeked of decay, sat a genuine leather lounge chair with a remarkably modern design. There was even a delicate little round table next to it, with a glass of juice with ice on it. A strong sense of unease arose spontaneously. At this moment, the old, worn-out record player in the cabin is tirelessly playing a dull and somber song. Yo ho ho ho! Bink's Fine Wine! The tune was drawn out so long that it made people drowsy. A slender hand reached out from the recliner. Snap! Lorne turned off the record player, and the world finally became quiet. He sat up from the recliner, stretched out a big yawn, and his joints cracked like popping beans. While this song is a classic, listening to it too much can indeed easily demoralize people. Lorne ran his fingers through his slightly disheveled black hair. As the only living person on the ship, he was also the captain, a combatant, and the cook. He has been adrift on this vast sea for quite some time now. Fluttering. A newsbird wearing a hat swooped down from the sky and skillfully tossed a newspaper into Lorne's arms. Lorne casually flicked a coin. The coin traced a golden arc in the air before landing perfectly in the small cloth bag hanging on the newsbird's chest. The newsbird chirped contentedly, then flapped its wings and flew away. Lorne unfolded the newspaper. It contained the same old content. Where have these new pirates come from? Which country has experienced another riot? Who did the Navy arrest this time? Boring, utterly boring. Lorne quickly scanned the pages until he saw the headline. It was a photo that took up half the page. The photo shows a man enveloped in blue-green flames, his eyes resolute, with a row of solemn and powerful figures standing behind him. The title is written in bold black font. The reckoning begins. Whitebeard's remnants assemble, and Marco the Phoenix declares war on Blackbeard. Teach. Lorne tapped his fingers lightly twice on the newspaper. Has it finally arrived? His lips curled into a smile, his previous languid demeanor vanishing, replaced by a chilling fervor. The final battle. That was the opportunity. That was Mars. The final battle between Marco and Blackbeard will shatter the false peace of this sea. The various forces that were originally wary of and checked each other will all be drawn into this vortex. A new era is about to begin. How could I miss out on such a lively event? Lorne casually tossed the newspaper aside. He stood up and vanished in a flash. The next second, he was already in front of the helm at the bow of the ship. Without a word, Lorne gripped the patina-covered steering wheel with both hands and swung it fully to the right. Squeak! This ancient sailing ship, which was on the verge of falling apart, suddenly let out a low roar, like an ancient behemoth awakening. The ship made a stunning sharp turn on the sea. The sails, which had been drooping listlessly, suddenly and strangely billowed and fluttered in the wind, even though there was no wind. Beneath the ship, wisps of faint white mist quietly appeared, carrying a lifelike aura, and swirled around the ship. Gol, a new world. At the same time, it was about 3 or 4 nautical miles behind Lorne's ship. A majestic naval warship is cutting through the waves at full speed. A huge banner proclaiming justice fluttered wildly in the sea breeze. On the observation deck, a naval soldier is nervously searching the sea surface through binoculars. Suddenly, his pupils contracted, and at the end of his line of sight, the strange, dark red sailboat came into view. Report. Target spotted. The soldier lowered his binoculars and shouted hoarsely at the deck below. 3 nautical miles ahead, a pirate ship resembling murderer Lorne has been spotted. At this shout, everyone on deck quickly took their positions. The soldiers quickly rushed to their respective combat positions, adjusted their cannons, and loaded their rifles. In the center of the deck, the cabin door was pushed open. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of high heels striking the deck was crisp and powerful. A tall figure stepped out. She was a woman with an extremely powerful aura. She had long pink hair and wore a fuchsia-fitted suit, which was the uniform of a naval officer, but she wore it with the fashion sense of a runway model. The coat of justice draped over his shoulders swayed in the wind. With a slender cigarette dangling from his mouth, his eyes, shrouded in swirling smoke, exuded an undeniable air of authority. Rear Admiral Tina Blackcage, Navy Headquarters. Lorne. Tina walked to the bow of the ship and took the binoculars from the adjutant. In the footage, the dilapidated 3-masted sailing ship is turning at an unscientific speed. Although the young man's silhouette at the bow of the ship was somewhat blurry, she could still recognize that unique, languid air about him, even if he turned to ashes. Tina was surprised. Tina put down her binoculars, exhaled a smoke ring, and spoke in a cold voice. He actually dared to show up near Sabayati at this time, and judging by his course, is he planning to go to the New World? The adjutant beside him wiped the cold sweat from his brow and asked, puzzled. Major Admiral Tina, that Lorne, his bounty is only 50 million berries, right? To capture him, we even deployed a warship of this caliber. Isn't that making a mountain out of a molehill? Chapter 2. The adjutant had just been transferred from the branch and didn't have a clear understanding of the title murderer. In his view, pirates with 50 million berries are a dime a dozen on the Grand Line, barely even qualifying to enter the New World. Upon hearing the adjutant's words, the faces of the surrounding veterans changed, and fear was revealed in their eyes. Tina glanced at her adjutant, her eyes filled with disdain for an idiot. 50 million. She gave a cold laugh, her slender fingers holding a cigarette, and pointed to the red boat in the distance. Do you know why his bounty is only 50 million? The adjutant paused for a moment, then subconsciously shook his head. Because almost everyone who witnessed him in action is dead. Tina's voice was calm, yet it sent a chill down the officer's spine. He debuted in Donghae in just 3 months. 16 naval branches in the East Blue were destroyed, and 7 large pirate crews were wiped out, not even a single intact body could be found. Headquarters cannot assess his devil fruit ability, nor can it determine his true combat strength. All that is known is that wherever he went, nothing grew. That's why he was given the title of murderer and a bounty of 50 million for sabotage. At this point, anger flared in Tina's eyes. She remembered 2 years ago. The humiliation of that boy in the straw hat slipping through her fingers. That was a stain on Tina's military career. And now, yet another arrogant newcomer is trying to break into a new world from her territory. Tina will absolutely not allow this to happen again. Tina threw the cigarette butt on the ground and crushed it out with her high heels. Send the order. Full speed ahead. Activate the black gun firing mechanism. The adjutant was horrified. Black guns? Those are special weapons developed by headquarters to deal with New World pirates, each one costs. Shut up and obey orders. Tina snapped. Yes. The warship's engines roared. White spray erupted from its tail, and its speed increased significantly. In just half an hour, the warships had closed into within firing range of Lorne's red ship. Target is within firing range. The gunner reported loudly. Tina stood at the bow of the ship, arms crossed, her long pink hair dancing wildly in the sea breeze. She looked at the red boat sailing ahead at its leisurely pace, a cruel sense of pleasure surfacing in her eyes. Lorne, your journey ends here. Fire. With Tina's command. The specially designed launch ports on both sides of the warship suddenly opened, and a series of muffled launch sounds filled the air. This time, what was fired was no longer a bulky, round cannonball. Instead, they were long, jet-black iron spears, each 2 meters long. This is an experimental weapon developed by Dr. Vegapunk based on ancient weaponry concepts. It possesses an initial velocity and penetrating power far exceeding that of ordinary artillery shells. Even pirates shrouded in armament haki wouldn't dare to take such a dense barrage head-on. Dozens of black iron spears ripped through the air, emitting a piercing shriek. It transformed into a black downpour, pouring down on Lorne's wrecked ship. Completion. The adjutant stared at the dense barrage of comments and couldn't help but mutter to himself. Under such firepower, let alone a wooden sailboat, even a small warship could be pierced through and sunk to the bottom of the sea. The sailors on deck all wore victorious smiles. Some people have even prepared retrieval nets, ready to retrieve the body of that murderer. However, just as the black rain of iron spears was about to touch the red boat, a sudden change occurred. The thin mist that had been clinging to the bottom of the ship suddenly seemed to be stimulated by something. With a loud bang, the fog burst open. It surged upwards and spread at a speed that defies the laws of physics. In the blink of an eye, the entire dark red 3-masted sailing ship was enveloped in a thick, grayish-white mist. The mist looked so light and airy, it seemed like a gust of wind could blow it away. But when those black iron spears, carrying terrifying kinetic energy, crashed into the fog, a bizarre scene unfolded. There was no explosion, no sound of planks breaking. Those iron spears, strong enough to pierce steel, slowed down drastically upon contact with the mist, as if manipulated by some unseen hand. The originally straight trajectory suddenly deflected in a bizarre way. All the iron spears slid to either side when they were still half a meter away from the hull. They were smoothly guided to both sides. Dozens of expensive black iron spears, without exception, all fell into the sea, creating splashes. The red boat, shrouded in mist, didn't even sway. It maintained its original speed, forging ahead through the waves. A profound silence fell over the entire deck of the warship. The naval soldiers, who had just been preparing to celebrate their victory, were now gaping, their eyes practically bulging out of their sockets. The adjutant's notebook fell to the ground with a thud. His fingers trembled as he pointed to the eerie mist ahead, stammering. How is this possible? That's a black gun that can even pierce the skull of a sea king. It was actually blocked by a cloud of fog. Not only the soldiers, but even Tina, who had always maintained a cool and aloof demeanor, had her pupils shrink. Her sunglasses had slipped halfway down, revealing her shocked eyes. That's not a Logia-type misty fruit. Tina stared at the churning mist. As a rear admiral in the Marine headquarters, she had witnessed countless devil fruit users. She was very familiar with smokers smoke fruit. But this cloud of mist is different, it doesn't give off an elemental feeling. Older, more mysterious, as if possessing a self-aware defense mechanism. Tina is very angry. Tina took a deep breath, forcibly suppressing the shock in her heart, and put her sunglasses back on. But her trembling fingers betrayed her inner turmoil. This Lorne is no ordinary pirate with a bounty of 50 million. This ocean is really going to be in chaos. On the sea, a rain of black iron spears fell with a mournful whistling sound. Thump, thump, thump. Countless splashes of water erupted around the mahogany sailboat, as if a torrential rain had begun. However, when the waves subsided, the seemingly dilapidated mahogany pirate ship continued to sail steadily on the sea, without even a single plank being scratched. The deck chair on the deck hadn't been moved an inch. The deck of the warship was deathly silent. The hypnotist, Zango, wearing heart-shaped glasses, subconsciously pushed up his glasses, his mouth agape wide enough to fit an egg. Is this luck? Zango muttered incredulously to himself. Dozens of black guns, all of them missed. Is this guy blessed by the sea god? Chapter 3. Colonel Carl, standing to the side, was ashen-faced. He gripped the commander's sword tightly in his hand, veins bulging on his forehead. As the commander of the elite troops, this elementary mistake was a slap in the face for him. Impossible. Even a blind man couldn't miss every shot. Carl roared, spittle flying everywhere. Load. Keep loading. Aim and fire. Bomb this wrecked ship to smithereens. The gunners frantically operated the firing devices again, and the second wave of sniper fire was ready to be unleashed. Stop! A clear, cool female voice rang out. Carl froze and turned to look. Tina had somehow reached the front of the gun emplacement. She took the cigarette from her lips, exhaled a puff of smoke, and stared intently at the red ship through her sunglasses. Tina was puzzled. She stretched out her hand, which was covered in dark gloves, and pointed to the sea. Did you see clearly, Carl? Those black guns, just as they approached the ship, experienced a slight deviation in their trajectory. Carl was taken aback and quickly raised his binoculars. Sure enough, the second iron spear fired in the test, just before hitting the ship's side, seemed to hit an invisible wall of air, mysteriously slid to the side, and fell into the sea. This! Carl broke out in a cold sweat. My observation Haki told Tina that a strange power was surrounding the ship. Tina casually flicked her cigarette butt into the sea, her eyes showing no fear, but rather the excitement of a hunter spotting his prey. It's not luck, it's ability. It seems this murderer is a user of some kind of devil fruit ability that we've never seen before. A cold, elegant smile curved her lips as she straightened her righteous coat. Cease fire and move forward at full speed. Ranged attacks are ineffective, so let's board and fight. Tina turned around, her high heels clicking crisply on the deck. Tina wants to arrest him herself and see what his abilities really are. Hearing their commander's confident order, the naval soldiers, who had initially been somewhat hesitant, were now in high spirits. Yes, Major General Tina. Move forward. Prepare for battle. In the eyes of the soldiers, Rear Admiral Tina was not only the prized student of Teacher Zephyr, but also a promising junior whom Vice Admiral Garp, the naval hero, had high hopes for. He mastered the 6 powers at a young age and possesses the powerful Cage Fruit ability. In the first half of this grand line, she was synonymous with invincibility. Even a pirate with a bounty of 50 million, no matter how strange his abilities, can't cause any trouble in front of Rear Admiral Tina. The warship's massive engines roared as the steel behemoth tore through the waves, charging forward with overwhelming force. A dozen minutes later, the massive shadow of the warship loomed over the small mahogany sailboat. The two ships sailed side by side, their enormous size difference making it seem like an ant was following an elephant. Tina stood on the towering ship's railing, looking down at the scene below. Upon closer inspection, the mahogany boat appears even more mysterious. The ancient patterns and aged texture make it resemble a work of art floating on the sea. What a beautiful ship! A hint of admiration flashed in Tina's eyes. Colonel Carl hurriedly rubbed his hands together, saying with a fawning expression, "If Major General Tina likes it, once you capture that Lorne, this ship will be your spoils. We'll tow it back to the stern of the warship, it'll be a perfect collectible for you." Tina gave a non-committal snort. At this moment, on the deck of the red boat below, the black-haired youth remained lying in the chair, a magazine covering his face, completely unaware of the enormous structure overhead. To impress his superior, Zango jumped onto the ship's side, grabbed a megaphone, and struck what he thought was a cool pose. "Hey! Listen up, pirates down there! I am Lieutenant Commander Zango of the Naval Headquarters. You are surrounded. Surrender, or else." Before he could finish speaking, a lazy but impatient voice came from the recliner below. "It's so noisy." Lorne reached up and removed the magazine from his face, squinted slightly, and looked up at the warship blocking the sunlight. "You're blocking my sunlight." His tone was flat, as if he were shooing away an annoying fly. This attitude of completely disregarding the Navy froze the expression on Zango's face. The naval soldiers on deck looked at each other in bewilderment. Is this guy insane? They're being blasted in the face by warships, and they're complaining about being blocked from the sun? UBD. Enraged, Zango pulled out a sharp circular saw blade from his pocket and stomped his foot. "You won't listen to reason, so you'll have to suffer the consequences. I'll teach you a lesson you won't forget." Zango, with his agile movements, leaped directly from the warship and pounced on Lorne, who was reclining on a deckchair. "Careful!" Tina frowned slightly, about to speak up to remind her, but it was too late. Just as Zango was about to land, Lorne, who had been lying down, merely lifted his eyelids slightly. There were no unnecessary movements, no one saw when he made his move. A dull, loud thud. The once aggressive Zango flew back at 10 times the speed it had come from. "Wow!" Zango let out a scream in mid-air, his entire body crashing through the warship's sturdy railing like a cannonball. The downward momentum shows no signs of abating. He slammed his fist heavily against the warship's mainmast. The solid wood mast, as thick as 2 people could hug, made a teeth-grinding crack sound as it was smashed open, creating a huge crack. Splinters flew everywhere, and Zango slid off the mast like a lump of mud, spitting out a mouthful of blood with a plop, his eyes rolling back as he lost consciousness. The naval soldiers, who were originally preparing to charge, suddenly fell silent, like ducks with their necks being choked. They stared in horror at the unconscious Zango, then at the man still sitting in the recliner below. A chill ran from the solace of my feet straight up to the top of my head. What just happened? Did that pirate move? It seems not. Colonel Carl turned pale with fright and rushed to Zango's side to check his breath, his hands trembling. "Alive, alive! Quick, call a medic!" Tina's sunglasses had slipped halfway down her face. Those once confident and beautiful eyes were now filled with shock. Just a moment ago, her observation haki had been locked onto Lorne. But to her horror, she couldn't catch the trajectory of Lorne's attack at all. In her perception, Lorne was like a wisp of mist, with no real substance. This guy. A strong sense of unease rose within Tina. This is not the strength a pirate with a 50 million bounty should have. This might not be the kind of monster you'd expect in the first half of the Grand Line. Since you're here, don't be in such a hurry to leave. Lorne's voice suddenly rang in my ears. Tina's pupils contracted. When she looked up, only to find that the figure that had been on the recliner had disappeared. Above, Tina, driven by her fighting instincts, suddenly looked up. The black-haired youth was seen squatting on the railing of the warship at some point. It was less than half a meter away from her. Chapter 4. Lorne rested his cheek on his hand, a mocking smile playing on his lips, as he scrutinized her with great interest. Rear Admiral Tina. I heard your devil fruit ability is quite interesting. That's too fast. It's so fast that even observation Haki can't react. Tina's hair stood on end. Just as she was about to back away, Lorne reached out his hand. Collapse. Long, slender fingers gently tapped Tina's smooth forehead, the crisp sound echoing loudly on the silent deck. Tina felt a sharp pain in her forehead, and the slight force sent her staggering back several steps. Humiliation. A blatant humiliation. As the unattainable beauty of the Navy headquarters, when has she ever been flicked on the forehead like a child? Tina is very angry. Tina's fair face flushed red, and her eyes seemed to spit fire. Black horsetail, lined horsetail. She spread her arms, and countless black iron bars surged from her body, transforming into a huge black cage that enveloped Lorne on the railing. Is this the cage fruit? It turns the body into steel shackles. Lorne looked at the black iron bars, a hint of disappointment flashing in his eyes. Too slow. As the black cage closed, Lorne's figure disappeared once more. After image. Tina's attack missed, and alarm bells rang in her mind. Behind you. Years of life-or-death combat experience allowed her to react swiftly, black handcuffs. She didn't even turn around, black shackles extended from her ankles, biting back like venomous snakes. This time, the shackles precisely locked onto Lorne's ankles. Gotcha! Tina was overjoyed. Once bound by her power, even a Sea King wouldn't be able to break free. She whirled around, her right glove hardening into a sharp black spear that whistled through the air as it hurtled straight for Lorne's throat. Black feather spear. This strike was swift, accurate, and ruthless. He held nothing back. Hope was rekindled in the eyes of the surrounding naval soldiers. We won. Major General Tina's abilities are unbeatable. However, Lorne's expression remained completely unchanged in the face of this deadly attack. He simply raised a finger wrapped in a jet-black sheen. The deafening clang of metal against metal made the eardrums of the surrounding soldiers ache. Time seemed to stand still at that moment. Tina stared wide-eyed in disbelief, her gaze fixed intently ahead. Her black feathered spear, with a sharp tip capable of piercing through steel plates. It was effortlessly stopped by the other party with just one index finger. That finger was covered with a layer of obsidian-like substance, exuding a chilling hardness. Armament Haki. Tina's voice was trembling. How is that possible? This level of armament Haki hardness is something that only a few monsters specializing in physical combat can achieve, even among the vice-admirals of the headquarters. Who exactly is this man? Is this all you've got? Loren said calmly. The next second, he slightly bent his finger and gently tapped it. Tina's incredibly hard black feather spear shattered instantly. The immense recoil caused Tina's hand to split open, and blood flowed freely. Before she could react, Lorne's hand had already cut through the flying shards and grabbed her wrist. With a quick twist, the handcuffs were pulled behind her back. Tina was forced to kneel on one knee, her cheek pressed against the cold deck, unable to move. Just one move. Rear Admiral of the Navy headquarters, utterly defeated. Release Major General Tina. Damn it. Let go. Seeing their goddess treated this way, the surrounding naval soldiers turned red with rage, brandishing their swords and charging forward like a tidal wave. The charge of hundreds of elite marines was a thunderous display of power. Lorne tilted his head slightly, looking at the crowd rushing towards him. A sharp, dark red glint suddenly flashed in those previously languid black eyes. It's noisy. An invisible, terrifying shockwave erupted instantly, centered on Lorne. That wasn't the wind, it was pure, tangible spiritual pressure. The air seemed to instantly become viscous like water and heavy like lead. The dozens of soldiers at the forefront didn't even have time to scream before their eyes rolled back, white foam appeared at their mouths, and they fell down in neat rows like cut wheat. Then came the people behind them. In that instant, hundreds of elite naval personnel, like dominoes, all lost consciousness and collapsed on the deck. The entire warship fell into a deathly silence. All that remained was the sound of the sea breeze fluttering the flags. Tina, pinned to the ground, was not unconscious, but the terrifying pressure made her tremble all over, and cold sweat instantly soaked her back. That was a tremor from the depths of one's soul. As Zephyr's student, she knew all too well what kind of power this was. Conqueror's haki. The qualities of a king, 1 in a million. She struggled to lift her head, looking at the indifferent man before her. Her confidence and pride were shattered in that instant. Armament haki hardening, observation haki prediction, and this terrifying conqueror's haki. This is hardly a rookie pirate. This overwhelming power, this despair-inducing spirit. Even the division commanders of the Whitebeard pirates weren't much better, were they? Who are you? Tina asked the question, her voice trembling. How could such a terrifying monster possibly lurk in the first half of the Grand Line? Silence reigned on the deck. Hundreds of elite naval soldiers lay sprawled on the ground, the only sound the sea breeze rustling through the tattered sails. Tina knelt on one knee, her once proud fuchsia suit now covered in dust. She was breathing heavily, her eyes, which always exuded authority and arrogance, fixed on the man before her. Fear, humiliation, and confusion, a mix of emotions swirled in her eyes. Just now, this man annihilated the entire ship of soldiers with sheer force of his will. Is this really the skill level of the newcomer from East Daxia Sea with a 50 million bounty? Who are you? Tina gritted her teeth and asked the question in a hoarse voice. She couldn't believe it, absolutely couldn't believe that an unknown person could possess such a terrifying and oppressive aura, even surpassing that of a lieutenant general in her unit. Lorne crouched on the railing, looking down at the disheveled rear admiral. Upon hearing the question, he paused for a moment, then smiled knowingly, pointed to himself, and spoke in a relaxed tone, as if chatting casually. Me? Didn't I just say? I'm Lorne, a rookie pirate from the East Blue with a bounty of 50 million. Stop joking. Tina looked up, her voice trembling with emotion, her chest heaving with anger. 50 million. This level of conqueror's haki, this overwhelming power, and you say you're a newbie. Are you treating the Navy like fools? Chapter 5. Seeing Tina's "if you lie to me again, I'll bite you to death" expression, Lorne stroked his chin. Yeah, these days nobody believes you if you tell the truth. Since that's the case. Lorne's smile suddenly vanished. He stood up, put his hands behind his back, and his previously lazy demeanor changed abruptly. The sea breeze ruffled his tousled black hair, obscuring his eyebrows and eyes, leaving only a pair of deep, dark eyes visible. He turned slightly to the side, leaving Tina with a solitary and mysterious back view. His voice became deep and magnetic, carrying the echoes of ancient times. Since you've asked so sincerely, then I will mercifully tell you. Lorne turned around, covering half of his face with his right hand, his fingers spread wide, and an eerie light flickered in one eye peeking through the gaps in his fingers, striking an extremely shameful yet strangely alluring pose. I am a ghost of the old era, a wandering soul lingering in the cracks of history. I am the disruptor of the new era, a demon king destined to turn this sea of hypocrisy upside down. Tremble, mortals! In this era poised to spiral out of control, I will be the sole eye of the storm. His voice was passionate and melodious, and combined with the coat billowing in the wind behind him, it exuded an air of sophistication. Lorne remained in that position, quietly waiting for Tina's reaction. According to the script, at this point, she should be stunned by this declaration full of mystery and destiny, her pupils contracting, or she should shout in horror, "What? Could it be that you are?" Or something similar. However, 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. The deck was eerily quiet. An oblivious seagull flew by with a caw, and even pooped on Lorne's head. Luckily, his observation haki was activated, and he slightly turned his head to dodge it. Lorne's face twitched, and he peeked through his fingers. Tina remained kneeling on the ground, her beautiful eyes showing no shock, no fear, only a silence and indifference, as if looking at someone with intellectual disabilities. That look in his eyes clearly said, "Is this person mentally ill?" The worst thing is when the air suddenly goes quiet. Lorne's hand, which had been holding the pose, froze in mid-air, and his toes were so embarrassed they felt like they could dig a marine headquarters out of the deck. Cough. He casually withdrew his hand, coughed lightly, and resumed his lazy demeanor, as if the person who had just had a fit of adolescent delusions was not him at all. "In short, it means I'm very capable, understand?" Tina didn't respond to his comment. She took a breath, forcibly ignoring the awkward performance she had just witnessed, and asked the last, and most perplexing, question in her mind. "Why?" She raised her head, looked directly into Lorne's eyes, and spoke with a resolute tone. "Since you possess such power, why don't you kill me? And why don't you kill these soldiers? For the Navy, losing to pirates is not shameful, but being pitted by pirates is." Tina clenched her fists, her nails digging deep into her palms. "It's an utter disgrace. For a soldier, dying on the battlefield is an honor. But being toyed with like a pet by the enemy and then let go was worse than being killed for the proud and arrogant Tina." Looking at her stubborn expression, Lorne shook his head helplessly. "I've said it before, I'm the freest person on this vast ocean." He squatted back down on the railing, his shirt fluttering in the sea breeze. "I can kill if I want, save if I want, and release if I want. I act entirely on my own whims, without needing to explain myself to anyone." At this point, Lorne paused, his gaze lingering for a moment on Tina's still stunning face, even with the dust covering it, his eyes momentarily glazed over. "And your arrogant, conceited, and stubborn temper is exactly like that of an old friend of mine." That old friend was a rough, burly man with a face full of scars, but his stubbornness was exactly like everyone else's. Tina paused for a moment. An old friend? Before she could think it through, Lorne had already stood up, assuming a posture ready to leave. Feeling humiliated? Then swallow that humiliation and turn it into motivation to become stronger. "Rear Admiral, with this level of strength in the New World, you're not even qualified to be cannon fodder." Lorne waved to her with his back to her. "Strive to become stronger, so that next time we meet, you can't even withstand one of my moves. As for my identity..." He turned his head and gave a wild, arrogant laugh. "Don't worry, soon the whole world will know who I am." As soon as he finished speaking, Lorne bent his knees slightly, stretched his body, and leaped into the air. It traced a graceful arc in the air and landed steadily back on the dilapidated mahogany sailboat. "The little ones, oh no, just me." Lorne landed in front of the steering wheel and quickly spun it with one hand. Full speed ahead. Destination, the New World. With his command, the ancient sailboat, which had looked like it was about to fall apart, was imbued with magical power. Buzz. The white mist surrounding the ship immediately churned, and the ship emitted a low rumble. The next second, to Tina's astonishment, the sailboat suddenly unleashed a terrifying speed far exceeding that of a naval warship. Like a red arrow released from a bow, it tore through the sea and in the blink of an eye became a small black dot on the distant horizon. Only a long white ripple remained, proving that it had once existed. On the deck of the mahogany boat, Lorne lay back down in the comfortable recliner and took a sip of the juice he hadn't finished drinking. "Hiss, did I just call her a little sister?" Lorne slapped his forehead, feeling extremely annoyed. Tina must be in her 30s by now, several generations older than this body I'm in. Tisk, that was too hasty. If she heard that, she'd probably be more upset than if she were killed. However, this thought only lingered in his mind for a second before he completely forgot about it. Who cares? We might not see her again anyway. On the deck of a warship, Tina struggled to her feet, gripping the railing, and stared at the tiny black dot that had disappeared below the horizon, remaining lost in thought for a long time. The sea breeze tousled her long pink hair, and it also tousled her heart. Only then, witnessing the terrifying speed the ship was unleashing, did she finally understand something. From the very beginning, Lorne was just playing along with them. The ship, despite possessing the speed to easily outrun the warships, deliberately lingered slowly ahead, waiting for them to catch up, waiting for them to fire, waiting for her to make her move. What she saw as a thrilling chase was nothing more than a boring game to kill time in that man's eyes. A hole. Tina bit her lip until she tasted blood. Bang! She slammed her fist into the railing, and the solid wood shattered with a crash. Lorne, Tina will remember you. That sense of powerlessness almost overwhelmed her, but just a few seconds later, the despair in her eyes was replaced by a blazing fire. This flame is her unwavering belief in justice. Chapter 6. Whether you're a ghost or a demon king. Tina faced the sea and let out a low, vow-like roar. Tina stakes on the name of justice, and one day, she will personally place these shackles on your hands. Just then, a groan came from the deck behind them. Colonel Carl, who had been knocked unconscious, clutched his head and groggily got up from the ground. He shook his head, his vision cleared, and the first thing he saw was Tina standing alone at the bow of the ship, her back looking desolate. Looking around again, the red pirate ship had vanished without a trace. Carl's eyes lit up, and he scrambled over there. Major General Tina. You're awake, wait, are you all right? Where is that pirate? Has he been defeated by you? In Carl's simple-minded logic, since Rear Admiral Tina was still standing and the pirate ship was gone, they must have been driven away. After all, this is Major General Tina, the woman who possesses the invincible cage fruit. Upon hearing Carl's voice, Tina took a breath and composed herself. She turned around, her face regaining its aloof and unapproachable expression, though her complexion remained pale. Once everyone is fully conscious, immediately return to headquarters. After saying that, she didn't even glance at Carl, and strode into the cabin. Hey? Back to headquarters? Aren't you going to pursue them anymore? Carl stood there, stunned, watching Tina's departing figure, and scratched his head. Looks like that pirate ran pretty fast, making the Rear Admiral so unhappy. The Colonel, who usually acted arrogantly and domineeringly, was unaware of his superior's unusual behavior. What he could never have imagined was that this naval goddess, whom he considered exceptionally strong and with a powerful background, had just experienced the most devastating defeat of her life. One day later. The end of the first half of the Grand Line, in the waters of the Sabayati archipelago. This is the only place that all pirates must pass through on their way to the New World. The roots of the dreamlike Yarkiman mangrove are intertwined, and huge resin bubbles rise from the ground, float into the sky, and refract the sunlight into a rainbow of colors. This is paradise, and it is hell. A bustling commercial street, an amusement park, and a shady slave auction house coexist in a lawless zone. Celestial dragons, marines, pirates, bounty hunters, all sorts of forces intertwine in this intricate web. A dark red sailboat silently sailed into the sea area. Lorne stood at the bow of the ship, watching the bubbles floating in the air, and stretched. Sabayati, it's been so long. His original plan was to stay here for a few days. After all, the entertainment industry here is quite developed, and I can also take the opportunity to extort, oh no, visit my old friend Rayleigh, who lives in seclusion at the extortion bar. I wonder if that old man is still in good health, whether he can withstand one of my punches. Lorne muttered with a wicked grin. Just then, a newsbird flew overhead and dropped a copy of the latest newspaper. Lorne caught it casually, his gaze sweeping over the headlines indifferently. The next second, his smile froze. Shocking! Blackbeard pirates launch surprise attack on Whitebeard's territory. Marco the Phoenix is forced to fight. The final battle breaks out ahead of schedule. Lorne's gaze suddenly sharpened as he read the lines of alarming headlines. Advance. He quickly skimmed through the content, his brow furrowing deeper and deeper. The original intelligence indicated a 7-day decisive battle, but it has been compressed into 3 or 4 days. That treacherous Blackbeard actually took advantage of the time difference before Whitebeard's remnants had fully assembled. Damn it, this means we don't have enough time at all. Lorne crumpled the newspaper in one swift motion. If we sail at normal speed, coat the vessel, dive, and pass through Fishman Island. By the time this whole process is completed, the daylily buds are already cold. Moreover, he doesn't want to clash head-on with the Whitebeard remnants captains right now. What he needs to do is enter the battlefield at crucial moments, not act as a babysitter. It seems we have no choice but to take a huge drastic measure. Lorne sighed, turned, and walked back to the captain's cabin. Pushing open that ancient wooden door, the scene inside was completely different from the dilapidated exterior. The walls are made of metal with a futuristic feel, with flowing blue light paths, and a huge holographic sea chart floating in the center, next to a sophisticated dial. This is the true identity of this ghost ship, a high-tech warship disguised as an antique. Lorne walked to the control panel and quickly tapped his fingers on the screen. Local coordinates, New World, Sphinx Isle waters. He pressed the permanent pointer that pointed to Whitebeard's hometown. His gaze then fell on a red button in the corner of the console, next to which was a line of small print. Ghost Shuttle Mode, consumes 1000 origin points. Effect, ship speed increased by 200%, gains the voidification ability, allowing the ship to pass through obstacles regardless of physical barriers, lasting 24 hours. 1000 origin points. This was something he had painstakingly saved up for a long time, intending to use it to exchange for the advanced Conqueror's hacky entanglement technique. You can't catch a wolf without risking your cub. Blackbeard, I'm holding you accountable for this. Lorne gritted his teeth and pressed the red button hard. Beep, command confirmed. Ghost shuttle mode activated. A mechanical electronic sound rang out. The next instant, the entire mahogany sailboat began to rock violently. A thick, eerie black mist surged wildly from the bottom of the ship, instantly enveloping the entire vessel. From the outside, the ship appeared as a massive, moving ghost, its hull translucent and emanating a chilling aura. A loud bang came from the hull. Without any acceleration, the red boat instantly broke the sound barrier, transforming into a black streak of light and speeding towards the red Earth continent. Lorne lay back in the hammock, feeling the pushback sensation, and closed his eyes. Just you wait, Teach. Since I'm going to disrupt this era, I won't let Whitebeard's demise be so cheap. This ship is about to become the eye of the storm in this new era, these peaceful days. I'm afraid they'll never come again. At the same time, on the sea near the Sabayati archipelago, a long ice tunnel stretches across the sea. A tall, curly-haired man wearing a dark blue shirt and carrying a backpack was riding a bicycle slowly on the ice track. Former Navy Admiral, Aokiji, Kyuzan. After losing the battle for the position of Field Admiral to Sakazuki on Punk Hazard, he resigned from his position as Admiral and left the Navy, having lost a leg. At this moment, his eyes were lost and filled with dejection. What exactly is justice? Kyuzan pedaled his bike, gazing blankly at the vast ocean. After leaving that system and taking off that coat, he saw many things he couldn't see before clearly. Perhaps Mr. Garp's choice back then was the right one. Chapter 7. Just as he was filled with emotion and preparing to find a place to sleep, suddenly, a chilling aura rapidly approached from behind. Kyuzan's intuition, a trait he possessed as a top-tier expert, sent chills down his spine. He turned around instinctively. A massive shadow, shrouded in thick black mist, was hurtling towards the sea at an incredible speed. Quick! That's too fast! It was so fast that even he, a Logia-type devil fruit user, was startled. Is it a ship? Kuzen's eyes widened. Before he could even see what it was, the ghostly sailboat had already swept past him less than 10 meters away with a piercing sonic boom. The strong wind whipped up huge waves, almost throwing him and his car into the sea. Hey, what are you talking about? Kuzen steadied his bicycle, his sunglasses askew, his face filled with astonishment. What happened next shocked him even more. Ahead of that ship lay the indestructible Red Earth continent, stretching between heaven and earth. At that speed, a collision would inevitably result in the ship's destruction and the loss of all life, leaving not even ashes. We're going to crash. Kuzen instinctively wanted to create an ice wall to block the way. But the next second, he stopped moving. The sailboat, shrouded in black mist, made no collision whatsoever the instant it touched the rocky cliffs of the Red Earth continent. It was like a true ghost, disappearing without hindrance straight into the incredibly hard red rock. Passing through walls. In the blink of an eye, the ship vanished into the rocky cliffs of the Red Earth, as if it had never existed. Only the ripples remaining on the sea surface proved that what had just happened was not an illusion. On the sea, only Kuzen, riding his bicycle, remained, staring blankly at the bare rock face, forgetting to exhale the cold air from his mouth. Era. After a long while, he finally reached up and adjusted his sunglasses, his face showing an expression of utter disbelief. Are all young people these days this reckless when boating? Going directly through the red line to the new world? Even Roger never did something like that, right? Red Earth, the massive rock wall that divides the world in two. The sea breeze howled, whipping up thousands of waves. Kuzen pushed his bicycle, stood on the turbulent sea, and looked up at the sheer cliff that stretched from the sky to the ground. He reached out, his cold palm gently tapping the rock. Thump, thump. A dull echo. It is solid, extremely hard, and has no mechanisms or passages whatsoever. Era, this is really weird. Kuzen scratched his tousled curly hair, his eyes behind his sunglasses extremely serious. Just now, right under his nose, that red sailboat, like a ghost without a physical form, crashed into the wall and disappeared. There was no sound of impact, and no flying debris. It was like passing through a curtain of water. That strange ability. Kuzen looked at the empty sea and felt a strong sense of unease rising in his heart. He had only felt this way once before, 2 years ago. That was on the eve of the Marineford War, when facing Whitebeard, who was known as the strongest man in the world. A premonition called the Era is going crazy. Who exactly is that young man piloting the red boat? A newspaper drifted down with the sea breeze and landed right on Kuzen's face. He tore off the newspaper, and what was initially just a casual glance suddenly became fixed in his eyes. The front page headline featured a huge portion of Blackbeard teaches toothless, wildly grinning face. A new emperor ascends the throne? The fated battle between Blackbeard and the Phoenix. The report used extremely exaggerated language to praise Blackbeard's forbearance and power, as if he had become the new master of the sea. Marshal D. Teach. Kuzen stared at the name, slowly uttering it, his breath freezing into ice crystals in the air. This world is about to descend into chaos again. He picked up the bicycle that had fallen onto the sea, climbed on, and took one last deep look at the rock face that had swallowed the red boat. The owner of that red boat also went to the new world. If that guy gets involved in this war. Kuzen shook his head, and his figure gradually disappeared into the vast sea. At the same time, New World, Naval Headquarters, New Marineford. Unlike the solemn and dignified atmosphere of the old headquarters, this place was filled with a chilling and murderous aura. In order to deal with the endless stream of monster pirates in the New World, the new fleet Admiral Sakazuki moved the headquarters to this most dangerous sea area, intending to suppress the four emperors. Throughout the base, soldiers were rushing about, creating a tense and high-pressure atmosphere. But in a rest area near the port, the scene was completely different. Snap! Snap! The crisp sound of biting into a rice cracker echoed throughout the room. A small banquet was being held in a spacious lounge. It was called a banquet, but it was actually just a private dinner for a few high-ranking naval officers. Pfft! Ha ha ha! Sengoku, is your senbei damp? It's not crisp at all. With his full head of white hair, Garp, dressed in his signature suit, sat cross-legged on the sofa without any regard for his image, clutching a bag of senbei, rice crackers, and stuffing them into his mouth while loudly complaining. Opposite him stood the former Marshal Sengoku, with a full head of white hair and round-framed glasses, who was fuming with anger. If you don't like it, then don't eat it. That's my secret stash. Sengoku snatched the bag of senbei, rice crackers, and held it protectively in his arms, like an old child guarding his food. And Garp! Can't you control your grandson? That BD Luffy is causing trouble everywhere in the New World. Sakazuki's face is practically contorted with rage. That's because he wasn't capable enough to catch it, so why blame me? Garp casually picked his nose and flicked out a blob of unidentified matter. Damn it! Don't flick it into my teacup! Sengoku was furious, and the two immediately started arguing, just like always. The others in the room were already used to this. General Candidate Momuzagi-jun, wearing a sexy pink kimono that accentuates her graceful figure. She held her teacup gracefully, looking helplessly at the two old rascals whose combined age was nearly 150. Beside her, T-Pig Cake, also a candidate for general, was lewdly fawning over her. Kiyuan, this is a beauty tea I specially brought back from the Western Sea. Roll. Peach Rabbit didn't even turn her head, her words concise and to the point. In the corner, Kobe and Helmeppo huddled together, shivering. Just hearing about this high-level game made the two newbies feel immense pressure. Squeak! The door was pushed open. Tina walked in, dressed in a bright pink suit. She took off her sunglasses, revealing slightly tired dark circles under her eyes. Her justice coat was also a bit wrinkled, making her look travel-worn. Yo, Tina-chan's back. Garp, with his sharp eyes, was the first to spot her and immediately grinned widely. I heard you got humiliated in Sabayati? Got beaten up by some kid with a 50 million bounty. Chapter 8. The warring states also stopped arguing, adjusted his glasses, and looked over with a mocking expression. I heard about it too. Apparently, he was so angry that he kicked 100 sandbags on the training field to pieces. Haha, young people these days have such poor mental resilience. The two old guys were singing and dancing in unison, clearly finding some amusement in their otherwise dull retirement life. After all, in their eyes, Tina, as a rear admiral of the Marine headquarters, although not top tier in strength, was absolutely invincible in the early stages of the Grand Line, a kind of beginner's village. Even if they occasionally stumble, it's probably due to carelessness or underestimating their opponent, or encountering some disgusting ability. A pirate with 50 million. T-Pig also came over, waving his fan and joking. Tina, if you're really still angry, I can go and catch that brat for you. I also want to go to the amusement park to clear my head. Faced with everyone's teasing, Tina didn't retort arrogantly as she usually does. She silently walked to the table, picked up a glass of cold water, and drank it all in one gulp. It wasn't carelessness. Tina put down the cup, her voice low and trembling slightly. Tina was completely crushed. The air in the room fell silent for a moment. Garp paused in his chewing of senbei, and Sengoku's smile also faded. Momotaro's beautiful eyes darted around as she looked at her best friend with some surprise. She knew Tina well, although she was a bit arrogant, she was definitely not the kind of person who couldn't accept defeat. For her to use the phrase completely crush, the other party must be no ordinary person. Crush. Momozagi put down her teacup and asked softly, is the other person a Logia type? Or some kind of special paramecia type? Tina took a deep breath, and the image of that man shattering her strongest attack with a single finger flashed through her mind again. That feeling of despair still leaves her with cold hands and feet. It's not a problem with the devil fruit's power. Tina raised her head, her gaze sweeping over everyone present, and spoke slowly and deliberately. That man looks to be only about 20 years old. But he possesses top-tier armament haki, capable of easily shattering Tina's black barrier. His physical skills and speed are so fast that even observation haki can't keep up with him. Most importantly, Tina paused, a flicker of fear crossing her eyes. He possesses Conqueror's haki. A single glance was enough to stun all 300 elite soldiers on the warship. The atmosphere in the room changed completely after those words were spoken. Kobe and Helmeppo stared wide-eyed, their faces filled with disbelief. 20 years old? Top-tier armament haki? And Conqueror's haki? What does this mean? This is practically a monster that started cultivating its powers in the womb. Conqueror's haki. Garp's smile vanished, and he frowned, lost in thought. There are indeed quite a few kids in the New World with Conqueror's haki, but to achieve this level at the age of 20. A potential Yonko, Emperor of the Sea. Sengoku stroked his beard, his expression becoming more serious, but he wasn't overly panicked. As a marshal who had commanded the navy for decades, he had seen far too many geniuses. A genius who dies young is not a genius at all. If it's so dangerous, why is the bounty only 50 million? T-Pig asked, puzzled. Because this was his first official appearance at sea. Tina pulled a crumpled bounty poster from her pocket, it was something she had clutched tightly in her hand all the way. Lieutenant General Garp, Mr. Sengoku. Tina requests an immediate increase in this person's bounty level and the dispatch of a lieutenant general level pursuit team. This man is extremely dangerous. If we don't nip him in the bud now, he'll definitely become an even more terrifying threat than the 4 emperors in the future. After saying that, she slammed the wanted poster heavily on the table. Snap! A crisp sound. All eyes were drawn to the piece of paper. The image shows the profile of a young man. Black, tousled hair, a languid gaze, and a half-smile playing at the corners of his lips. His name was written below. The murderer, Lorne. Lorne. Sengoku glanced at the name, his brow furrowing slightly. Without major acts of sabotage or attacks on member states, the bounty cannot be easily changed based solely on potential. As he spoke, he habitually picked up his teacup, intending to take a sip. Garp waved his hand dismissively. Ha ha ha. Tina, you're too nervous. Young people these days, once they have a little bit of ability, they become arrogant and overconfident. What 4 emperors prospect? In our time, I could take down those brats with a single punch. Garp smiled and reached for the bounty poster, saying as he did so. Come here, let me see which brat bullied you like this. Next time I see him, I'll beat him up for you. However, when Garp's gaze actually landed on that name and that young face, his laughter stopped abruptly. In that instant, Garp's usually squinty, comical old eyes suddenly widened. An indescribable aura of terror erupted from the old man, hailed as a naval hero, instantly engulfing the entire room. That was the aura of an unparalleled powerhouse who had weathered countless mountains of corpses and seas of blood, and who had fought against Roger. At the same time, a loud bang was heard from the side. The moment he saw that name, the teacup in Sengoku's hand was instinctively crushed in his hand. The scalding hot tea splashed all over him, even onto his face. But he seemed to have lost the ability to feel pain, completely unaware of it. This former admiral, known as a wise general, remained calm even when faced with a collapsing mountain. At this moment, that dignified face was filled with shock. The veins on his forehead bulged, and his face instantly turned deathly pale, looking extremely ugly. The relaxed and cheerful atmosphere in the room vanished in an instant. Instead, there was a suffocating sense of oppression. Kobe and Helmeppo were so frightened by the sudden burst of power from these two big shots that they collapsed to the ground, trembling and not daring to even breathe. Momuzagi and Chiton were also startled and stood up, their hands on their weapons, looking bewildered and nervous. They had never seen these two legendary figures show such an expression. Even during the Marineford War, when faced with Whitebeard's fist that shattered the atmosphere, they had never lost their composure like this. Seeing their reactions, Tina's suspicions were confirmed, and her heart pounded wildly. That Lorne, he's definitely no ordinary person. After a long while, Garp slowly exhaled a breath of stale air. He stretched out his iron fist, powerful enough to shatter mountains, and tremblingly grabbed the bounty poster on the table. That thin piece of paper felt as heavy as 1,000 pounds in his hands. It's probably just that they look alike. Garp's voice was low and hoarse, completely lacking its usual booming quality. He stared intently at the man's features in the photo, his fingers unconsciously clenching the wanted poster until it was crumpled. Chapter 9. The age doesn't match. That person has been dead for over a decade. We confirmed the death ourselves. Beside him, Sengoku also came to his senses. He hastily wiped the tea off his face, the shards of the teacup in his hand already crushed into powder, falling softly from between his fingers. Yes, he's dead. Zhangguo muttered to himself, as if trying to convince himself. But then he frowned, his gaze turning extremely gloomy. But, what if that person left behind descendants? Judging by the time, I should be this age by now. Boom! No sooner had Sengoku finished speaking than Garp slammed his fist on the table. The sturdy solid wood round table shattered into pieces instantly, sending wood chips flying everywhere. Shut up! Sengoku period. Garp roared furiously, that joke isn't funny at all. Sengoku, however, did not back down. He abruptly stood up and retorted sharply, Garp. You know better than anyone what this means. If that's true, that's a hidden danger 100 times more dangerous than Roger. That's the most evil bloodline in the world. If he were to regain his former power, this world, no, the entire red line would be turned upside down. Sengoku's voice echoed in the room, carrying an undisguised fear. Have you forgotten what that person did back then? Garp remained silent. The anger in his eyes gradually subsided, replaced by an extremely complex expression. There's nostalgia, regret, and also a touch of admiration. I haven't forgotten. Garp sat back down on the sofa, looking as if he had aged 10 years. I still think that guy's choice back then was admirable. Garp. Sengoku sternly rebuked him, mind your position. You are a vice-admiral. If the 5 elders heard these words, you'd be implicated too. Sengoku took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. He paced back and forth in the room, his steps hurried and disordered. No. Sakazuki must be informed of this immediately. Whether it's a coincidence or not, whether it's related to that person or not. To maintain global balance, all potential threats must be eradicated. As he spoke, Zhangguo began to walk away. Wait, Garp called out to him. Sengoku, are you going to repeat Ace's mistakes? Are we going to kill another young person for the sake of a potential bloodline? Zhangguo paused, his back to the crowd, his voice as cold as iron. Garp, this time is different. Ace was Roger's son. Although Roger started the Great Pirate Era, he was at least a human being. And that person's bloodline. Zhangguo turned around, his eyes flashing with a cold light. That's the natural enemy of God. It's not for execution, it's for survival. I suggest immediately requesting a general-level pursuit team. If you're still worried, then you and I will have to get involved ourselves if necessary." Having said that, Sengoku didn't linger any longer and strode out of the room. The door slammed shut. Only suppressed breathing could be heard in the room. Momuzagi, Shitan, Tina, and the two soldiers in the corner were all dumbfounded. A storm raged in their minds. Who exactly is it? What kind of person could inspire such fear in a naval hero and a former admiral? They'd even go so far as to deploy their top generals, or even personally go after a newcomer. "Mr. Karp." Tina couldn't help but speak, her voice hoarse. Who is that person?" Momuzagi and Shitan also cast inquiring glances. Although they were high-ranking officials, they still knew nothing about some top secrets from more than a decade ago. Garp sat on the ruined sofa, still clutching the bounty poster tightly in his hand. He looked out at the sea, his eyes narrowed, as if he had pierced through time and space and seen that arrogant figure who had once stood shoulder to shoulder with him and Roger, but who had eventually parted ways. His tone carried a melancholic, wistful air as he slowly recounted a secret that had been completely suppressed by the world government and even erased from history books. All of this is related to the legendary vice-captain of the Roger Pirates. The younger brother of the pirate king Roger. Related to Gol D. Lorne. The air in the room seemed to freeze, so heavy it was suffocating. The crumpled bounty poster in Garp's hand seemed to weigh a ton at that moment. The sound of the waves crashing outside the window became exceptionally clear, each sound like a tapping on everyone's heart. Gol D. Lorne. Tina repeated the name, her voice hoarse. Roger's brother? This news was like a bolt from the blue, shattering her historical knowledge learned at military school. Did the pirate king Roger actually have a younger brother? And this was someone the Navy headquarters once feared so much? It's not just about being a younger brother. Sengoku took a deep breath, calmed his earlier outburst, and sat back down in his chair, though his face remained terrifyingly grim. He pushed up his glasses, the glare obscuring his eyes, and spoke in a low voice. That guy is the shadow hidden behind Roger's brilliance, the true emperor of the Roger Pirates. If Roger was an adventurer seeking freedom, then Lorne was a pure destroyer, a complete madman. T-Pig couldn't help but interject, if it's so powerful, why have we never heard of this name in all these years in the Navy? Because the world government fears him. Garp sneered, pulled a new senbei from his pocket, and crushed it in his teeth. So terrified that his existence must be completely erased from history, so terrified that he dares not even mention it. Do you know about the Mary Geoise attack 14 years ago? Momuzagi's eyes narrowed, and she nodded, I've heard of it. It's about the fishman explorer Fisher Tiger climbing the Red Line with his bare hands and freeing thousands of slaves. Could it be? Humph, Fisher Tiger. Sengoku let out a disdainful snort. That merman may have some backbone, but how could he possibly cause such a commotion in the Holy Land all by himself, and escape unscathed? The truth is, that was just a ruse set up by that madman Lorne to cover his tracks. Tiger went to rescue the slaves, while Lorne... Sengoku paused, a flicker of barely concealed fear crossing his eyes. He was alone, carrying a sword, and he stormed in through the main gate. His goal isn't slavery at all, he's aiming for the highest power in the world. That night, the blood shed in the Holy Land of Mary Geoise stained the Red Line a deeper shade. He slaughtered more than half of the celestial dragons who lived there. Hiss! A collective gasp filled the room. Chapter 10. Kobe and Helmeppo were so frightened their eyes almost popped out of their sockets, and they covered their mouths, too scared to make a sound. Slaughtering celestial dragons? Still half. In a world where striking a celestial dragon even once would summon an admiral, how dare someone slaughter a celestial dragon? And they even killed half of them? This is absolutely outrageous. This is impossible. Tina felt a chill run down her spine. This was utterly unbelievable. How could the world government possibly let this go? Let it go? Of course not. A look of reminiscence crossed Garp's face, a look of remembrance for the strong, and a lingering fear of that brutal battle. That was the greatest disgrace in the 800-year history of world governments. In order to eliminate Lorne alone, the world government launched its strongest buster call to date. Garp stretched out his rough fingers and recounted the lineup from back then. The commander-in-chief of the entire army, Kong, is personally overseeing the operation. The marshal at the time was Sengoku, the general was Zephyr, and so was I. Plus, there were Lieutenant Generals Sakazuki, Borsellino, Kuzan, and more than 10 elite lieutenant generals from headquarters. All elite agents from CP0 to CP9 are mobilized. As Garp called out each name, Momuzagi and Chiton's faces grew paler and paler. This is hardly a buster call. This has completely drained the Navy and the world government's coffers. This lineup could blast the current 4 Emperors pirate crews to smithereens. It was all just to round up one person? And then? Tina asked, trembling. Result. Sengoku gave a wry smile, took off his glasses and wiped them. The result was a Pyrrhic victory. No, you could even call it a defeat. That siege lasted for 10 days and 10 nights on the ruins of Mary Geoise. Sakazuki had half his shoulder severed and nearly died on the spot. Barusalino was stabbed in the heart and spent 6 months in intensive care. The CP forces were almost completely wiped out, less than 1 in 10 survived. Finally, Lorne, exhausted, was captured under the combined pressure of me, Garp, the commander-in-chief, and 3 others. The only sound in the room was the rapid breathing of everyone. Sakazuki and Borsellino, they're the current fleet admiral and admiral. They're Logia-type monsters standing at the pinnacle of the world. He was almost killed back then? What kind of monster is that Lorne? He was secretly executed. Garp continued, his tone turning somber. Deep within Mary Geoise, the execution was personally overseen by a few of us old men. Before he died, the madman neither begged for mercy nor showed any fear. He simply laughed at the void, leaving behind a prophecy. Garp mimicked Lorne's tone from back then, his voice deep and arrogant. Don't worry, I will return. With even greater power, I will crawl back from hell and utterly smash this rotten throne. At the time, we all thought it was just his dying ramblings. But now? Garp looked at the wanted poster on the table again, and seeing the young face that was exactly the same as in his memory, he felt a chill run down his spine. If this newcomer really is a descendant of Lorne, or, even some kind of continuation of that madman, the troubles of this era have only just begun. Compared to him, the current 4 emperors are like children playing house. Garp sighed and slumped onto the sofa, as if he had instantly lost all his strength. If the battle for the 4 emperors in the New World hadn't been so intense, the Navy wouldn't have been forced into such a desperate situation. Thinking about it now, I still feel lingering fear. After hearing this long-buried story, Tina, Momuzagi, and the others were speechless for a long time. They admired Lorne's courage to stand against the world alone, and felt ashamed of the Navy's powerlessness in the face of being intimidated by one man. It turns out that the so-called justice and peace are actually built on such a bloody history that has been covered up. Garp looked at the silent crowd, his heart filled with worry. Just how much of that monster's power did that murderer Lorne inherit? If he really intends to fulfill that vow to smash the throne, this ocean may truly be stained red with blood. At the same time, a new world, a certain sea area. Achoo! Achoo! Lorne, who was standing at the bow of the ship, suddenly sneezed twice and rubbed his nose. Tisk, who's talking about me? He sniffed, looking suspicious. It must be either Garp or those 2 old geezers, Sengoku, who saw my bounty poster, right? He's probably so scared he's wet his pants right now. Lorne chuckled mischievously, in a good mood. At this moment, the dark red sailboat is in ghost shuttle mode. The ship was shrouded in an eerie black mist, like a ghostly fish swimming in another dimension, ignoring the currents and reefs, and sailing straight through a stormy sea. Ahead, the outline of an island gradually became clear. It was an ordinary-looking island, with most of its area occupied by towering mountains. At the foot of the mountain, several dilapidated wooden houses were scattered, covered in dust and cobwebs, clearly uninhabited for a long time. This is Sphinx, the home of Edward Newgate, the world's strongest man. Arrive. Lorne steered the boat to shore. Ignoring the tattered disguises, he skillfully navigated a secluded mountain path and arrived at a massive waterfall. Open! Lorne snapped his fingers, and the black mist on the ship extended outwards, instantly parting the waterfall's flow to reveal a deep, dark cave behind it. After passing through the cave, the view suddenly opened up before us. It was a world like a paradise. Tender green grass carpeted the valley, and a crystal-clear stream flowed gently, with several exquisite water wheels turning slowly in the stream, making creaking sounds. In the distance, several enormous beasts lay docilely on the grass, allowing several children to climb on their backs. A kind old man sat under the tree, watching this scene with a smile. Peaceful and serene. It was completely different from the war-torn new world outside. This is the last sanctuary that Whitebeard guarded with his entire life. Lorne stood on high ground, and his observation haki instantly covered the entire valley. There's no trace of Marco. He nodded slightly. It seems that guy has already led the remnants of the Whitebeard pirates to fight Blackbeard. Perfect, saves me the trouble of explaining. Lorne did not disturb the ordinary people in the valley. With a light tap of his foot, he soared into the air like a rock, using moon steps to fly straight towards the mountaintop. Along the way, several giant beasts on guard noticed the intruders and were about to roar. Lorne merely glanced at them indifferently. An invisible aura of domineering power pressed down precisely. The giant beasts instantly tucked their tails between their legs, whimpered, and obediently lay down on the ground, not daring to lift their heads. Chapter 11. A moment later, Lorne landed on the mountaintop. This is a wide, flat area planted with cherry blossom trees that bloom year-round. Amidst a flurry of pink petals, stood a colossal tomb. There were no luxurious decorations, only a huge raw stone tombstone. Before the tombstone, a massive naginata, one of the 12 supreme grade swords, Murakumogiri, was stuck in the ground. A white captain's shawl and several flower wreaths hung from the hilt of the knife. That's Whitebeard's grave. Next to it, there was a slightly smaller tombstone with an orange cowboy hat hanging on it. Ace's grave. The wind blows, and the shawl flutters in the wind, as if that tall figure still stands here, guarding this land. Lorne looked at the naginata, his eyes not so solemn as they revealed a businessman's shrewdness. Old man, even in death you can't rest in peace. He walked straight up to her without any hesitation and grabbed the hilt of the Murakumogiri sword. The instant his hand touched the hilt of the knife, a cold, mechanical voice rang in his mind. Ding! High compatibility soul medium detected. Target, Edward Newgate. Identity, former Yonko, Emperor of the Sea, user of the tremor fruit, strongest man. Status, dead. Do you meet the recruitment requirements? Yes. Hint, the host currently possesses 600,000 source points. Resurrection Plan A, peak state, requires 5 million origin points, insufficient balance. Resurrection Plan B, Marineford era status, requires 2 million origin points, insufficient balance. Resurrection Plan C, minimum vital signs state, preserves peak consciousness and fruit abilities, physical body requires rest and recovery, requires 500,000 origin points, executable. Looking at that string of zeros, Lorne couldn't help but feel a pang of heartache, his lips twitching. 500,000. This is all the wealth I painstakingly accumulated in the East Blue by killing pirates, fighting the Marines, and even sneaking around during the Marineford War. It was originally intended to be used to upgrade Conqueror's Haki entanglement. Lorne stared at the Naginata with a conflicted expression, like a miser. But when he thought about the plans ahead, Blackbeard's arrogant face, and the impending battle, he couldn't help but think about it. Without a strong henchman, he's really struggling to carry the load alone. Forget it, you can't catch a wolf without risking your cub. Lorne gritted his teeth, steeled his resolve, and said, System, execute Plan C. Recruit Whitebeard. Ding, 500,000 origin points deducted. Recruitment process initiated. As the system notification tone faded, the mahogany sailboats moored on the shore suddenly burst into a dazzling light. A visible white beam of light shot out from the ship's cabin, traversing the distance of space, and plunged straight into the tomb atop the mountain. Boom! The earth began to tremble. The once clear sky suddenly became overcast with dark clouds, and thunder rumbled. The entire Sphinx island trembled, as if some terrifying being was awakening. The villagers in the valley looked up in terror, staring towards the mountaintop. What happened? Was it an earthquake? That's the direction of Dad's grave. Just as everyone was filled with doubt and uncertainty. At the top of the mountain, the huge original stone tombstone suddenly cracked open. Immediately afterwards, an incredibly thick, scarred hand burst forth from the ground and grabbed the Murakumogiri stuck in the earth. A violent shockwave, centered on the grave, swept across the entire cherry blossom grove in an instant. Petals flew wildly through the air. Amidst the swirling rain of petals, a towering figure, as tall as a mountain, slowly rose from the earth. Although he still smelled of earth, and his face was still as pale as paper. But that domineering aura that looked down upon the world surged into the sky like a volcanic eruption. He gripped his Naginata tightly, and roared to the sky, a roar filled with boundless rage that shattered the dark clouds above. Teach! Teach! This roar was like the howl of a demon crawling out of the abyss of hell. Filled with endless resentment and murderous intent, it ignited the atmosphere of the entire Sphinx island. Rumble! A terrifying, dark red shockwave, centered on the shattered tomb, swept wildly outwards in a ring shape. This is the Conqueror's Haki of the world's strongest man at his peak. Without any frills, the substantial pressure, like a heavy hammer, slammed down on this land. Black and red lightning flashed in the air, and the hard rock ground around the cemetery cracked instantly. Countless fragments of stone floated up against gravity and then turned into dust under high pressure. The beautiful cherry blossoms that danced in the air were instantly pulverized by a domineering force. Well! Down in the valley, the villagers, still in shock and disbelief, didn't even have a chance to react. Under this overwhelming, soul-shaking imperial pressure, thousands of ordinary people rolled their eyes, fell to the ground in unison, and immediately lost consciousness. Within a radius of dozens of nautical miles, the once calm sea suddenly began to churn. In the deep sea, those enormous sea kings seemed to sense a fear from the depths of their blood, and they fled madly away from the island, stirring up huge waves on the sea. Even some distant place in the New World, thousands of nautical miles away, several powerful figures standing at the pinnacle suddenly raised their heads and looked in the direction of the Sphinx, their hearts inexplicably stirred. That's the return of the king. And at the very center of the storm, Lorne's black hair was whipped wildly backward by the strong wind, and his clothes fluttered in the wind. Faced with this overwhelming and terrifying aura, he not only did not back down in the slightest, but his face instead revealed an uncontrollable joy. At that very moment, a melodious system notification sounded in his mind, like heavenly music. Ding! Congratulations, host! Your first 10-star crew member, Whitebeard Edward Newgate, has been successfully recruited. The beginner main quest Form a Pirate Crew has been perfectly completed. Rewards are being distributed. Reward, 10% of Whitebeard's physical attributes at his peak. Reward, understanding of Whitebeard's peak haki, all 3 colors. Reward, a perfect replica of the Paramecia-type tremor fruit ability. Reward, Pirate Ship Sticks upgraded to LV2. Reward received, 100,000 Origin Points. Reward, 1 World Turmoil Point. As the reward arrived, Lorne felt as if his body had transformed into a giant furnace. A powerful current of warmth instantly flowed through his limbs and bones. The young body, which was originally strong but somewhat frail, is now undergoing a tremendous evolution. Muscle fibers become denser and tougher, bones crackle, and blood surges through the veins like a rushing river. The feeling was like putting a space shuttle engine on a sports car. Chapter 12. But that's not the most astonishing part. What shocked Lorne even more was the strange power that appeared out of nowhere within his body. That was a vibration. If he wanted, he could even manipulate and shatter space at will. Is this the power of the tremor fruit? Lorne clenched his fist, feeling the world-destroying power within him, his eyes gleaming. If we say that he could barely be considered a top-tier Yonko vice president before, thanks to his bizarre methods and conqueror's haki, then, now that he has made up for his shortcomings in physical attributes and devil fruit abilities, he has truly stepped into the pinnacle of the sea, the Emperor level. Even if it's only 1/10 of Whitebeard's physical attributes, for this 20-year-old body with unlimited potential, it's still a qualitative leap. Lorne let out a breath and was about to check the attribute panel. Suddenly, a chilling sense of crisis washed over me. Teach. Amidst the billowing dust ahead, the towering, demon-like figure had already moved. Whitebeard, who had just been resurrected, was still in the moment when he was besieged by Blackbeard during the Marineford War. Even in a weakened state, the fighting instincts of that sea overlord remained undiminished. His bloodshot eyes were fixed on the blurry figure ahead, mistaking him for that betraying son. Whitebeard clenched his left fist and pulled it back. A semi-transparent white spherical halo instantly condensed on his fist. That's a sign that the tremor fruit is about to activate. The atmosphere seemed to groan under its own weight, as if this punch would shatter even space itself. Without a word, Whitebeard, carrying overwhelming killing intent, unleashed a punch. Airquake. The atmosphere was instantly cracked, and a terrifying shockwave transformed into an invisible dragon, roaring as it rushed toward Lorne. This attack is enough to easily destroy a town. Faced with this devastating attack, Lorne did not dodge. Or rather, at this very moment, having just gained new power, he has no intention of hiding. Well done. Lorne laughed loudly and casually tossed away the naginata in his hand. He also pulled his right fist back, his 5 fingers suddenly clenching. The next second, an identical white spherical halo also appeared on Lorne's fist. Brilliant, dazzling, yet filled with an aura of destruction. Since you insist on fighting, then I'll use you to test this power. Lorne's eyes burned with determination. Instead of retreating, he advanced and met Whitebeard's fist head-on with a fierce blow. 2 fists, one large and one small, both enveloped in a white aura, collided violently in mid-air. Time seemed to stand still for 0.1 seconds. Immediately afterwards, boom! An indescribable, terrifying roar echoed through the sky. At the point where the 2 fists collided, space itself seemed to shatter like a mirror, cracking open with countless dark fissures. A blinding white light engulfed everything. The entire Sphinx Island trembled violently, as if a magnitude 10 earthquake had struck. The cherry blossom slope beneath their feet collapsed instantly, and countless pebbles were crushed into powder by the shockwave. The surrounding seas were in complete chaos, with ocean currents reversed and towering waves crashing, as if the end of the world had arrived. This is precisely the terrifying aspect of the tremor fruit, which Sengoku described as possessing the power to destroy the world. During the stalemate, Lorne grunted, his feet carving 2 deep furrows in the ground as he slid backward several meters before regaining his balance. In contrast, Whitebeard's enormous figure merely swayed slightly before remaining as steady as a mountain. As expected of the world's strongest. Lorne shook his slightly numb right hand and gave a helpless, bitter laugh. Although he possessed the tremor fruit, he had only recently acquired it, and his proficiency was far inferior to that of Whitebeard, who had been immersed in this art for decades. In addition to his physical limitations, even when facing a weakened version of Whitebeard, he still struggled to match his strength head-on. However, that one punch was enough to prove his strength. There are very few people on this vast ocean who can withstand a powerful blow from Whitebeard in his rage without getting hurt. Whitebeard on the other side seemed to be taken aback for a moment as well. He looked at the familiar white halo on Lorne's fist, a look of confusion crossing his eyes. Tremor fruit? Wasn't that BD Teach trying to steal the devil fruit? How could he? But the next second, anger once again overwhelmed reason. Give me back my abilities! Whitebeard roared, and his other hand once again gathered a terrifying aura, preparing to launch a second attack. Seeing that the old man was about to explode again, Lorne didn't want to fight anymore. If the fighting continues, this island might sink. Hey! Edward Newgate! Lorne laughed loudly, his voice filled with domineering power, piercing through the roar and reaching Whitebeard's eardrums. Should we continue playing? I don't really care, it's a good opportunity to practice on you, but... Lorne pointed to the collapsed ground around them and said mockingly, are you sure you want to completely destroy your homeland? Open your eyes and look carefully. This is not Marineford, nor is it heaven. These words were like a bucket of cold water, immediately extinguishing the white-bearded man's anger. Home? Whitebeard's raised fist, the size of a clay pot, suddenly stopped in mid-air. The milky white halo of the tremor fruit slowly dissipated. His cloudy eyes scanned his surroundings. The familiar valley, the familiar cherry blossom trees, and that naginata stuck in the ground, his own. Memories flood back like a tidal wave. Marineford War. Blackbeard. Death. Here it is. Whitebeard withdrew his fist, his gaze finally settling on the young man before him. Black hair, black eyes, and that smug smile. Although he's much younger, he'd recognize that irritating aura even if he were ashes. It's you, you little brat. The murderous intent in Whitebeard's eyes dissipated, replaced by a deep sense of helplessness and complexity. Call. He let out a long breath and plopped down on the ground, making the ground tremble again. You rascal, every time you show up you bring me a ton of trouble. Whitebeard looked at Lorne and said irritably. If this weren't my hometown, I'd punch you so hard you'd fly right onto the general's desk. Ha ha ha. Don't be so heartless. Lorne smiled nonchalantly, walked over, picked up the mud-covered white shawl, and casually tossed it to Whitebeard. We've been friends for a long time. The white-bearded man took the shawl and casually draped it over his broad shoulders, concealing the shocking scars on his body. An old friend. He glanced at Lorne and muttered. Every time I see your face, my old wounds ache. Likewise. Lorne sat cross-legged opposite him and retorted without backing down. You tried to kill me back then, didn't you? You broke my ribs several times. Chapter 13. I recall those fierce clashes with the Whitebeard pirates in my early years. The battles of that era were far more passionate and pure than those of today. At that time, Lorne was still a fledgling challenger, while Whitebeard was at his peak. The two fought from the moment they met, but in the end, they developed a mutual respect and friendship. Karalalala. Whitebeard suddenly drew the massive Naginata Murakumagari beside him and let out a hearty laugh. That's because you're too weak, brat. He joked. Your strength is as weak as your age. I could easily crush you with just one hand. Cut. Lorne curled his lip, his gaze sweeping over the white-bearded man's chest, riddled with needle marks and scars, and said mockingly. Stop bragging, look at the state of your body. The disease has reached its terminal stage, riddled with holes, but at best it's still stubborn. Whitebeard was not angry upon hearing this. He reached out and grabbed an unopened bottle of wine next to the tombstone. It was used by the villagers for their memorial services. Snap! He crushed the bottle opening, not caring whether there was dirt inside, and tilted his head back to gulp down a large mouthful. Glug glug! As the strong liquor went down his throat, the white-bearded man wiped his mouth, his eyes sharpening. He casually tossed the bottle to Lorne. "You brat, you never do anything that doesn't make you money." Whitebeard stared into Lorne's eyes and asked in a deep voice. "Why did you go to all that trouble to pull me back from hell?" Lorne caught the bottle steadily, tilted his head back, and took a sip. The spicy liquid flowed down his throat, invigorating him. "For what?" Lorne put down the bottle, a maniacal smile spreading across his face. He looked directly at the former maritime tyrant and said, word by word, "So that together with you, we can turn this hypocritical world upside down." Whitebeard paused for a moment. Then, he burst into another earth-shattering laugh. Karalalala! Karalalala! The laughter made the surrounding cherry blossom trees tremble. "That's exactly what that BD Roger said back then." The white-bearded man laughed so hard tears almost came to his eyes. He lowered his head, looking at Lorne with a mocking gaze. "Roger couldn't convince me back then, and now you want me to be your subordinate. Why should I? Just because you're still all grown out." Lorne did not mention the system binding. He knew Whitebeard's pride all too well. Such a coercive contract would only disgust the man. What he wanted was for Whitebeard to join him willingly. "I can bring you back to your peak." Lorne threw out the first chip. Whitebeard remained unmoved, even showing some disdain. At his level, he had long since taken life and death lightly, and power was utterly insignificant. Seeing this, Lorne was not surprised. He leaned forward, his gaze deep, and said softly, "What if I said, it was for your family?" Upon hearing the word family, the white-bearded man's gaze sharpened, and his aura instantly turned dangerous. Lorne continued without pausing, "Do you know what the situation is like outside right now? That BD Teach stole the tremor fruit's power after your death and now he's ruling over a region, calling himself Admiral Blackbeard. He is relentlessly hunting down your sons. Marco, Yozu, Vista, they're currently being cornered by Blackbeard, and could be wiped out at any moment." Click! The bottle in Whitebeard's hand was instantly crushed into powder. His chest heaved violently, veins bulged on his forehead, and an uncontrollable rage erupted from the depths of his heart. Teach, that BD. He can disregard his own life and death, and he can disregard fame and fortune. But he would never allow anyone to harm his sons. That's his Achilles heel. Seeing Whitebeard on the verge of exploding in rage, Lorne pressed his advantage and threw out his final trump card. He held up one finger and pointed to the grave next to him with the orange cowboy hat hanging on it. The voice, though soft, boomed in the white-bearded man's ears. "What if I told you I could resurrect Ace?" Whitebeard suddenly turned his head and stared intently at Lorne. For the first time, an incredulous tremor appeared in those cloudy old eyes. "What did you say?" "I said, I can revive Ace." Lorne's gaze was firm, without the slightest hesitation. "If you join my pirate crew, I'll help you reach the top. I'll bring that brat who follows you around calling you daddy right back to you, completely intact." After a long silence, the white-bearded man's eyes flickered. In the end, all the domineering spirit and anger turned into a heavy sigh. In the end, he couldn't overcome the bonds with his family. "You little brat!" Whitebeard shook his head, reached out and grabbed the shards of the bottle in front of Lorne, and without caring whether he cut himself, poured the remaining liquid into his mouth. As despicable as ever. He wiped his mouth and revealed a relieved smile. "All right. I'm selling my life, which I was given a second chance at, to you. But let me make this clear first, if I can't save Ace, I'll chop you in half first." Lorne smiled. He raised his empty hand as if holding a glass of celebratory wine. Make a deal. Two legendary pirates who should have been dead made an alliance on this desolate island that would change the course of the world. No one could have predicted it. Whitebeard, one of the 4 emperors and the strongest man in the world, became the first member of this new pirate crew called Lorne. What kind of towering waves will this team, currently consisting of only 2 people, create on this vast ocean in the future? Half an hour later, Whitebeard grumbled as he cleaned up the damage the battle had caused to his hometown, and also went to comfort the villagers who had been stunned by the overwhelming power. Lorne stood alone on the deck of the Styx, enjoying the sea breeze. He was in a great mood. Not only did they recruit the strongest henchmen, but they also obtained the abilities they had always dreamed of. System. Lorne silently recited it in his mind. What's going on with this tremor fruit? Didn't Blackbeard already take it? Why can I still get it? Is it possible for 2 identical fruits to exist in this world at the same time? And what exactly is the purpose of that world turmoil point? On the shore of Sphinx Island, the waves crashed against the rocks with a rhythmic roar. Whitebeard, carrying his enormous naginata, went to inspect the village on the island, ostensibly to appease the villagers, but probably actually to find some sake and boast a bit. Lorne sat alone at the bow of the mahogany sailboat, the sea breeze ruffling his black hair. He didn't look at the sea, his gaze was fixed on a pale blue, semi-transparent screen of light that only he could see. Only now, when he's undisturbed, does he have time to properly study his cheat code after his rebirth. So that's how it is. Lorne stroked his chin, suddenly realizing what was happening. Chapter 14. When he transmigrated into Roger's younger brother in his previous life, this cheat ability was so rudimentary it was like a half-finished product. The only feedback is that after killing someone or defeating a strong person, one's physical abilities will inexplicably become stronger. At that time, he thought it was some kind of metaphysics of seeking enlightenment through killing. Now I understand that the system was plundering source points to strengthen his physical body. However, the vast amount of origin points he accumulated over decades of fighting, after his rampage in Mary Geoise and subsequent annihilation by the Navy, did not disappear. They not only became the energy source for this rebirth, but also completely activated the system's full form. Is this ship the embodiment of that tangible form? Lorne stomped on the deck beneath his feet. This seemingly dilapidated mahogany sailboat is actually the core of the system. Its basic functions are simple and straightforward, resurrecting powerful figures from the old era, recruiting crew members, ghostly travel, and a fog shield that can even deflect Vegapunk's black gun. With the completion of the newbie quest, form a pirate crew, more core information has been unlocked. Lorne's fingers swiped across the light screen, and lines of detailed explanations appeared before his eyes. Crew recruitment mechanism: the host can receive 10% of the physical attributes of recruited crew members at their peak. The higher the crew member's rating, the greater the additional rewards, including but not limited to, special abilities, perfect replication of devil fruits, ship functional components, and a large amount of origin points. Upon seeing this, Lorne's breathing quickened slightly. 1/10 of physical attributes might not sound like much, but what if you are recruiting a monster like Whitebeard? What if it were Roger? What if it's a golden lion? Quantitative change leads to qualitative change. When the power of these monsters from the old era converges in one person, he becomes a true human weapon. System, I have a question. Lorne asked in his mind. The reward: perfect replication of a devil fruit. If I and my crew members possess the same devil fruit ability, will there be any conflict? Also, I already possess the tremor fruit. If I acquire other devil fruit abilities in the future, will I explode and die like an ordinary person? This is the most crucial question. On this vast ocean, the coexistence of 2 fruits is an ironclad taboo. Even Blackbeard, that outlier, only managed to do so with his unique physical structure. The system's mechanical voice immediately echoed in my mind: completely unresponsive. Answering the host, all abilities rewarded by the system are analyzed and reconstructed at the rule level by the origin point. 1. There is no conflict in their abilities. The host's tremor fruit and Whitebeard's tremor fruit are independent entities and do not interfere with each other. 2. There is no uniqueness restriction. The abilities produced by the system are unaffected by the curse of the sea. 3. There is no physical rejection. The host's body has been digitally modified by the system, making it compatible with an unlimited number of abilities, and there is no risk of the dual devil fruits exploding. Holy crap! Even Lorne, who was used to seeing all sorts of things, couldn't help but swear. He jumped up from the deck, his eyes shining. This isn't some kind of cheat code. This is practically an official cheat code. Immune to sea stone? Unfazed by sea water? And can eat fruit indefinitely? This means that he could create a Frankenstein's monster body that combines all the top-tier abilities of the tremor fruit, magma fruit, and glint fruit. At that time, let alone the 4 emperors, even if I were sitting on the void throne, he would dare to rush up and slap him twice across the face. Awesome! Absolutely awesome! Lorne rubbed his hands together. The feeling of wielding invincible power was more intoxicating than drinking the strongest liquor. Calming himself down, Lorne continued reading. In the corner of the attribute panel, a red value stands out prominently. Current global turmoil level, 1 point. Source: the resurrection of Whitebeard. Edward Newgate severely skewed the timeline, causing serious causal disturbances. Instability point. Lorne frowned. What's the use of this thing? Explanation: instability points are a concrete representation of the degree of interference in the world's causal lines. Purpose: used to unlock and upgrade special functional buildings on the ship. Current ship level, LV1. Only has the basic building sailor's room, can recruit combatants. The remaining special buildings, such as training grounds, research institutes, armories, and infirmaries, are all sealed and require turbulence points to unlock. Lorne understood immediately. The underlying logic of this system is, cause trouble. The bigger the trouble they cause, the more profound the impact on the world, the more instability they generate, and the stronger their ships and themselves become. This was practically made for him. He originally intended to overturn this era, and now, driven by profit, he's even more determined to go all out. This is forcing me to play the villain. Lorne grinned. But I like it. Now that we've figured out how to use the cheat codes, the rest of the process is clear. They can either recruit more powerful figures from the old era, create big news to earn turmoil points, or slowly restore Whitebeard's body using origin points. Just as Lorne was pondering whether to set off fireworks at Marine headquarters or take a stroll around the Holy Land, the system notification sounded again. Note: the new player mission rewards include 1 ship upgrade privilege. Upgraded, the ship's size will be significantly increased, its appearance optimized, and new building slots unlocked. Use immediately. That's a must. Without hesitation, Lorne ordered, upgrade immediately. This dilapidated ship is a bit too much of a disgrace to my and Whitebeard's prestige. This mahogany sailboat has a rustic and mysterious feel to it, but in reality it's only a little bigger than an ordinary 3-masted sailboat. It's fine for 2 people, but it will definitely be crowded if more people come in. If the goal is to build the strongest pirate crew, appearances must be impeccable. Command confirmed. Ship upgrade initiated. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire ship suddenly began to shake violently. Lorne keenly sensed a massive, chilling energy surging forth from the depths of the ship's hull. Immediately afterwards, the familiar grayish-white mist enveloped the entire ship. But the fog did not obstruct Lorne's vision. Standing on the deck, he witnessed firsthand an evolution that could only be described as miraculous. The wooden planks beneath my feet are wriggling, growing. The originally old, dark redwood grain became even deeper, harder, and radiated a metallic sheen. The ship's sides expanded rapidly to both sides, and the mast rose from the ground, piercing the sky. The ship, which was originally only a few dozen meters long, expanded and stretched at a visible speed in the fog. The ram at the bow of the ship twisted and deformed, transforming into a ferocious and majestic skeletal demon, its eyes burning with eerie blue flames. At the stern rises a magnificent, palatial captain's cabin, exuding both luxury and imposing grandeur. Chapter 15. About 10 minutes later, the fog dissipated. A brand new steel behemoth rests quietly on the sea. Ding! Ship upgrade successful. Current level, LV2. New building, Sailor's Room X1. Unlock special building, Infirmary, not yet available. Lorne stood on the spacious deck, which resembled a plaza, looked around, and nodded in satisfaction. The ship is now nearly 100 meters long and has an extremely deep draft, making it comparable in size to the top-tier battleships of the Navy headquarters. The original sense of dilapidation and crumbling had vanished, replaced by a calm, somber, and oppressive atmosphere. Even someone as tall as a white-bearded man no longer had to walk with a stoop on this ship. Ding! Ship has been detected to have evolved to a new stage. Please name the ship. Note, the ship's name will carry the pirate crew's will and destiny, please choose carefully. Lorne paused for a moment. Name it. He walked to the bow of the ship, stroking the chilling skull ram, feeling the faint sense of intimacy emanating from the hull. This ship is sentient, like a legendary ship spirit. It carries the souls of the old era, returning from hell to unleash a storm in the new era. Lorne's mind flashed Roger's dying smile, Whitebeard's roar, and the faces of countless ambitious men on this sea. Since we must end this false peace and bury this corrupt order. Lorne's gaze was deep and unfathomable. He spoke in a deep voice, his tone decisive. Then let's call it, the end of an era. The end of an era. With this ship, we toll the death knell of the old era, and also serve as a funeral dirge for the new. Ding! Naming successful. Ship name, the end of an era. Reward, World Turmoil Points +1. Lorne smiled. You can even get some free turmoil points just by choosing a name, this system is pretty user-friendly. View vessel details. With a thought, a three-dimensional cross-sectional model of a ship appeared in my mind. The interior space of the current end of time is quite spacious. The top floor is a private captain's cabin, as luxurious as a palace. There are 2 sailors' quarters on the middle floor. One has already been occupied by Whitebeard, while the other is still empty and waiting for someone to take it. In a certain area at the bottom level, there is a room icon that is flashing red. Special building, Infirmary, unlocked. Unlock cost, 1 world turmoil point. Currently has 2 turbulence points. Lorne stared at the icon, lost in thought. Health room? It sounds like a medical clinic, but within this system, it's much more than just a place to see a doctor. Although Whitebeard's physical condition has been stabilized by the system, it is still a truly crippled body. Heart failure, pulmonary fibrosis, and countless hidden injuries left by the Marineford War. Without systematic treatment, relying solely on the source points to sustain the fight will inevitably lead to a significant reduction in combat effectiveness. Moreover, Lorne himself needs strong logistical support. Unlocked. Lorne waved his hand and generously dumped a few points of turbulence. Points earned are meant to be used, keeping them won't produce offspring. Ding! 1 point of turmoil consumed. The special building infirmary is now unlocked. As the notification tone faded, a faint mechanical hum came from the lower deck of the ship. The previously closed metal door slowly slid open to both sides, revealing the true appearance inside. Lorne, after checking through the system's view, gasped in shock. This is hardly a health clinic. This is practically a miniature futuristic biological laboratory. Operating lights, life support tanks, gene analyzers. It was equipped with all sorts of high-tech devices that Lorne couldn't even name. The system's explanation followed. Infirmary Function Overview. 1 Medical Bonus, produces medical books and materials that are 50 years ahead of the current era, significantly improving the medical skills of the ship's doctor. 2 Supply Replenishment, daily automated production of high-quality bandages, antibiotics, analgesics, and other basic medical supplies. 3 Life Field, for wounded soldiers in the infirmary, the rate of injury deterioration is reduced by 90%, and the chance of death is significantly lowered. 4 Medicated Hot Spring, requires further upgrade, unlocks a medicated hot spring with miraculous healing effects, with a small chance of permanently repairing long-standing injuries. Seeing the first 3 points, Lorne already felt it was excellent value for money. Especially that Life Force Field, it's practically a super-enhanced version of the intensive care unit. As long as there's a breath left, being dragged into this room will basically ensure survival. But when he saw the last additional note, his eyes widened. Special recruitment permissions, the infirmary can be exclusively managed by one old-time doctor. Note, this doctor does not occupy a sailor's room slot. It doesn't take up a spot. Lorne slapped his thigh hard. That's a true divine skill. It's worth noting that the current ship only has 2 crew quarters. One was given to Whitebeard, and Lorne was still debating whether to recruit a navigator or a cook for the remaining one. Now it's great, the doctor is practically giving away a free hospital spot. This not only solved Whitebeard's treatment problem, but also indirectly expanded the team's size. Doctors of the old era. A candidate came to Lorne's mind. That old man who lived in the Twin Straits, spent his days guarding the lighthouse and reading the newspaper, and also gave injections to a huge whale. Crocus, the doctor of Gol D Rogers' ship. In terms of medical skills, that old man was undoubtedly the most outstanding person on this vast sea. It was he who forcibly extended Roger's life back then, allowing Roger, who was suffering from a terminal illness, to complete his final voyage. In terms of seniority, he was a member of Roger's pirate crew and an old acquaintance of Whitebeard. Most importantly, with the help of this infirmary, coupled with Crocus's medical skills, curing Whitebeard's chronic illness is definitely not a dream. It's decided. Lorne snapped his fingers, revealing a confident smile. Next target, the Twin Straits. First, tie that grumpy old man up. Oh no, please get him on the boat. With the miracle doctor, this old, weak, sick, and disabled Sunset Red Pirates crew finally has true sustainability. At this very moment, far below the reverse mountain, the starting point of the Grand Line, lies the Twin Straits. The sun was shining brightly, and the sea breeze was gentle. Beneath a small lighthouse, an old man wearing a floral shirt and with hair styled like flower petals lay on a beach chair, leisurely reading a newspaper. Behind him, the enormous island whale named Labu was occasionally letting out mournful cries as it crashed against the rocky walls of the red earth. It's so noisy, Rabbi. Crocus put down his newspaper and sighed helplessly. How many times have I told you, don't crash it, those guys aren't coming back. Just then, Crocus suddenly sneezed 3 times in a row without warning, so much so that snot bubbles came out of his nose. He rubbed his nose, feeling a strange chill creep up his spine, making him shiver. What's going on? Crocus frowned and looked around at the empty sea with a suspicious expression. I have this feeling, like I'm being watched by something unclean. Chapter 16. With the infirmary unlocked, Lorne figured out the details of his own base. In other words, to upgrade the infirmary to its maximum level, you first need to upgrade the ship. And ship upgrades require both turbulence points and origin points. Lorne rubbed his temples. This system is a money-devouring beast, forcing him to cause trouble. He glanced at the existing configuration. The captain's cabin includes ghost shuttle and world chart builder functions. The first-class sailor's quarters includes a recruitment of old-time crew members feature. As for the newly unlocked level 1 infirmary, although I haven't gone inside to take a closer look yet, the passive effect of the life field alone is enough to make this ship the safest mobile fortress on the high seas. Let's go out and see what the upgraded level 2 ship looks like. Lorne turned off the system panel and pushed open the heavy mahogany door to the captain's cabin. Although he was mentally prepared, when he actually stood on the second floor platform and looked down at the entire ship, the direct visual impact still stunned him for several seconds. The rotten, creaking hardwood deck that used to be there is gone. The entire deck was now covered with a layer of tender green turf. The grass was no ordinary grass, every blade was lush and green, exuding a fresh fragrance, and undulated in the sea breeze, creating green waves. Lorne leaped and jumped from the second floor. The ground beneath my feet felt soft and springy to the touch, more comfortable than the most expensive cashmere carpet. This isn't a pirate ship, it's clearly a floating golf course. Lorne stomped his feet twice with satisfaction. He looked around, and the changes to the ship's structure were even more dramatic. The buildings behind the main mast have been expanded to 2 stories. The first floor had 2 spacious sailors' quarters, Whitebeard occupied one, and the other was empty. The second floor is his private, luxurious captain's cabin, with excellent views. A spacious viewing platform extends from the top, furnished with several beach chairs. At the bow of the ship, a delicate single-story building has appeared on the previously empty deck, that is the newly unlocked health room. Through the glass window, one can vaguely see various advanced medical instruments and walls lined with medical books, their cold metallic sheen contrasting sharply with the warm grass outside. Unfortunately, it's empty now, no doctors have moved in yet. Lorne walked to the ship's side and reached out to stroke the dark red hull. It feels cool to the touch and has a jade-like texture. Although it still looks like wood, its hardness and density of grain far surpass those of the legendary Adam the Tree. The system's assessment is straightforward, a 2-stage hull with built-in kinetic energy absorption and self-repair characteristics. Unless it encounters a concentrated attack from 3 or more admirals, conventional artillery fire, slashing attacks, or even a single attack from an admiral would hardly leave a mark on this ship. Above their heads, huge red sails fluttered in the wind. The color was a deep, rich red, exactly like the Oro Jackson of Roger's pirate crew back then. On the sail, the huge skull and crossbones symbol was particularly eye-catching. Ghostly flames burned in the skull's eye sockets, and 2 tattered, dark flags were crossed behind it, exuding the weight and arrogance unique to the old era. Comfortable. Lorne stretched and lay down on the ground. The soft grass enveloped my back, the scent of grass and the sea filled my nostrils, and the warm sunshine bathed my body, making me want to take a nap. Lorne slept very soundly. He only slowly awoke when the setting sun painted the sea a golden red hue. As soon as I opened my eyes, I saw a towering figure standing on the viewing platform at the bow of the ship. Whitebeard, wearing his signature white coat and holding Murakumagari in his hand, was quietly gazing at the distant horizon. The golden afterglow shone on his deeply lined face, casting a long shadow that was both imposing and tinged with a touch of melancholy. Lorne sat up, brushed the grass clippings off his body, and jumped onto the platform in a few leaps. What? Missing your hometown? Lorne walked up to Whitebeard and asked casually. Whitebeard didn't turn around, but looked in the direction of Sphinx Island, which had already become a blurry little black dot. Those little devils, crying their eyes out. The white-bearded man grinned, his signature crescent-shaped mustache twitching. That commotion just now was too loud, it shook down quite a few houses. The repair costs will probably be substantial. That's because you didn't control your strength well.